Welcome to the Classical Commons podcast, where we host conversations concerning the ideas, the people, and the trends in classical ed. I'm Rob Jackson, founder of this digital platform, which is connecting classical schools to talent and resources. Today's guest is a colleague, a friend, and a partner of Classical Commons. He's the founder of the Classic Learning Test, which has grown in a mere 10 years to become a real competitor to the big two, as they might be referred to, the ACT and the SAT. Jeremy Tate, an extraordinarily energetic entrepreneur, has created a company that would reorient high-stakes testing toward the advancement of liberal arts education. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, Rob Jackson. We've been friends now for like 9 years. It's been,
oh my
it's
goodness,
been a minute. You know,
almost as old as the CLT. I'm right in there
right.
at the beginning, right?
It's been incredible the way this movement has taken off. We were all kind of working below the radar, back in 2015, 2016, and now it's like everybody knows that there's this classical wave, and it's incredible to be a part of it.
This classical wave. Love it. Love it. Well, I tell you what, it's important for us on this podcast to make sure that people understand where it's come from, because 10 years seems like a long time, but man, it's flown by. You know, those unfamiliar, I'd love for you to give just a quick recap of your journey that led to the founding of CLT. It's a great story. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. I was working in a school, in a Catholic school 10 years ago, and I was really excited. I'd always been in a public school arena. I went to public school my whole life. I taught for 3 years in inner city New York. I taught in a series of suburban public schools after that. And I was very excited to get into a Christian school setting, and it was a wonderful school in so many ways. But I was really shocked, Rob, when I got there to see the power and the influence of the College Board on full display in this school. And one of the very first ways that I saw this very sweet Dominican sister, Sister Mary Bridget, she was launching 2 new electives at Mount DeSales Academy. One was an intro to philosophy. The other was an intro to Christian apologetics. She was so excited. I remember talking to her about the course sequence and the text the students would be reading. And then registration time comes along and 2 or 3 kids signed up. Nobody signs up for it. And I was a college counselor, and I was having the conversations with the students. Well, why didn't you want to take the new philosophy class? These are the greatest questions a person can ask. What is happiness? What is a good life? And the number one response, Rob, was, Mr. Tate, it's not any AP points. And I thought, this is wild that we can't get our Catholic kids at a Catholic school in Catonsville, Maryland, to take the most important classes for us because of the power and influence of this testing company in New York City. And so it was the beginning of kind of a big dream of what if there was a competitor. I was also running an SAT, ACT prep company at this point, and I saw, Rob, what they were doing. They were doing 2 things. One is they were censoring. Nothing good from the Western intellectual tradition was being put on the SAT or ACT. And the other thing they were doing is they were putting passages in, predictable passages, that were suggesting a particular view. I don't mind students reading absolutely everything, but when they're hitting students constantly, passages denigrating marriage or only giving one side of an issue, it's very clear the College Board is also pushing a political agenda. And so, I've always been a big daydreamer. I didn't love school growing up, but I would daydream a lot. I remember in this process just thinking, what would it be like if something like the College Board existed, but it had the DNA of something like the Searcy Institute, or Classical Academic Press. It had this vision in mind for education. And so we started very humbly. We had 46 students on our first test, June of 2016, 46 nationwide. And then this year, 2025, we're projected to test nearly 500,000, if not more, test takers. And a lot of that comes from...
500,000.
That's right. And that's going all the way down to 3rd grade.
Yeah.
But that comes on the heels of some big legislative wins now in Florida and Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana. And I think a lot of folks have been searching for... everybody knows there's something wrong with education.
Yeah.
But they haven't been able to say what they want instead. What they do want, they've been saying, they want some of the more toxic ideas taken out of mainstream ed. But that's not an exciting vision of just taking out the most toxic ideas.
Just the extrication of the bad stuff. I mean, what are you going to put in its place, right?
Exactly. And now that classical education is on the radar, is on the main stage, people are saying, that's it. That's what we want for our own kids.
Yeah, yeah. And it's what we want for our own kids. I think that's really important to emphasize, because we might just sit on the sidelines and consider this a theoretical conversation. It might only be about public policy if it weren't that these are our children, right? And we care about their upbringing. You know, this last July 4, I got something in my email box. I'm going to actually put this up on the screen. Not this one. This is your website. But let me just show what I saw in my box. And I thought to myself, what is going on here? What are you coming up to? So take a look at this. This was in the inbox, and it announced that the CLT, Classic Learning Test, was introducing a new initiative, the American Civics Exam. Now tell me, Jeremy, what got you going, and how did you get involved in this business of civics?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, when I think about the whole CLT project, and this has been, in some ways, you know, the heart and soul. Now, I'm not saying that education ought to be aimed at citizenship, right? I believe as a Christian that the aim is heaven, the aim is Christian sanctification. That's my view of education. But you know what? When that's the aim, I think people make really good citizens as well. And I think that there is something extremely rare and something really special that has to be present to have actual self-government. I think we've tried to, put our system of government in places around the world, and it hasn't worked real well. And I would argue that it's not working real well right now in America, but I think it's for a different reason than a lot of people think. And you think about our founders and the generations before them that were exercising self-government in the American colonies. And this is why I think this question is so fascinating and why I love to talk about it, is you have to have a degree, not that you can measure virtue, but you have to have a degree of virtue in a society to have self-government. And one of our convictions at CLT has been that the test is never just an evaluative tool. The test is always also a pedagogical tool. Tests convey what's actually important. And I think this is why just adding a civics class into the mainstream schools doesn't solve the problem, because young people need to love the founding ideals of our nation. And I think, Rob, coming from a Great Hearts background, and you understand this. It's about shaping the affections in the right way. And we think a test can actually be pointing to that richer and deeper telos as well. And that's what we're excited about.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing for me is that this has been on the radar, as they say, for a little while now. Civics education. And I think I've taken note. You certainly have been paying attention to the number of organizations that have laid this out as a primary concern. We saw, I guess, 6 months ago, maybe the third annual Jack Miller Center had a civics corral. They brought together a group of
we're huge fans of Jack Miller Center. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're doing the work. And then, of course, we've seen, in addition to that summit, the AEI group, our own colleagues and friends. I think they're also part of the CLT advisory board. Just released this civic thought question, from their experience working both at the American Enterprise Institute, but also at the higher educational element where they've been for years. Is there a sense that this is the moment? Like, what's happening in civic education, civic thought, that really makes this a primary concern?
Yeah, I think we watched the bottom drop out in 2020. I mean, the amount of dysfunction we've seen in American discourse, life over the past 5 years, we have no idea how to have a basic conversation with somebody who sees the world in a different way. And so I think we've seen a real breakdown in not just civic knowledge, but just basic civility itself. Rob, when we launched this, I had my daughter and a few of her friends, they made a video in downtown Annapolis, and they were, we sent a videographer out here, and they were having conversations with regular folks. And she actually found out that folks knew a little bit more than I suggested to her they did, based on the questions, that I had given her. In fact, she called me up and she said, "Dad, a lot of these people actually know a lot of these questions." I said, "You're gonna have to find some dumber people then, And so we got that out there. But you find a generational gap, and this is what she experienced as well. And in fact, I believe MSNBC put out an article in maybe 2016, 2017, that 81% people under the age of 45 would fail the same citizenship test that immigrants are required to take for citizenship here. And that's a test that's both multiple choice and short answer
Sure.
and oral as well. But what a crisis! I mean, the legal immigrants are like the only people. They're some of the only people
Who really
who
understand
actually
our civic structures. Yeah, that's right.
exactly. Yeah. So it's in a state of crisis, and so much so that I think there's going to start to be some real bipartisan support for this. Of like, okay, can we all at least agree we should have a basic understanding of how our system of government was designed to operate? So, the process, we're looking at really commemorating the 250th anniversary of America's founding next July 4th. And what we're going to be doing in the next year is working with really key stakeholders, the Heritage Foundation, AEI, really kind of any, we want to kind of bring as many people in. And I think this is something CLT has learned since we launched. When we launched CLT, we didn't really know folks in this movement. When we launched our lower grade suite of assessments, we said, hey, we don't want to be self-appointed experts.
Sure.
We want to maximize the voices of the best, schools in the country. A lot of these classical Christian and classical charter flagships, and we want to do the same thing with the civics test as well. Of have something that all of these key stakeholders, Jack Miller and so many others, can say, yes, this is what we need to all put our energy behind.
One of the things CLT has done so well is focused on primary sources, getting back to great works that have stood the test of time. That's the CLT at large. Is there a way in which the civics exam is going to do something comparable in working from primary sources?
Potentially. I mean, so many ideas on the table right now. Even the format, is multiple choice static, multiple choice adaptive, oral, written, essay, so we want to make sure to, I mean, we have a hard launch date, and I love to do that because it can keep us accountable to driving forward, because a lot of things you just get derailed with just talking, so
Sure,
I'm like, all right,
sure.
let's have our date and let's choose this date because it's an amazing date. And then, make sure that we can get the very best thing that we can, come up with. But, certainly, the CLT primary sources, SAT and ACT, they don't go back really before the early 20th century now.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the new SAT, as you may know, the longest reading passage, 150 words, the shortest 25 words. These are tweets, right? And the College Board actually is removing these passages of America's founding, probably because you can't say much of anything of substance in 25 words.
Right, that's right.
And so, absolutely, we want the testing experience itself to be pedagogical, to be an experience where they learn more. And I think this is one of these rare moments where you do get students, cell phones not in the room, they're hyper-focused on a text, they want to understand what it's saying, and in that, hopefully they have the aha moment of, what makes our system of government, so great.
Sure.
That's what I'm excited about.
Civics and civic education has oftentimes veered in the direction of a kind of ideological or political activism. I wonder, in terms of the domains that you're going to be covering with this exam, if there's a way in which you're moving away from, toward, or somehow balancing out that inclination in civic education that we see broadly across the country.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a really fun. Everybody's playing with Chat GPT and Grok. I'm sure you're doing this.
Yeah, sure.
Incredible tools. And I put in some time ago, create a short 10-question civics test from the perspective of the Federalist.
Huh.
And then I did create a 10-question civics test from the perspective of the Anti-Federalist. And it was really cool. Chat did exactly the thing we have been saying tests do. The test was slanted in the direction of either the Federalist or the Anti-Federalist and the things they wanted to test and they wanted to convey. Yeah. So look, at the end of the day, we don't want everybody to have a seat at the table. We want people within the classical educational renewal movement to have a seat at the table because we feel like that is the most excellent kind of education, and therefore we should be setting the academic standards for the rest of America. So will there be some diversity of thought in this, and are we going to try to hit some compromises? For sure. But are we going to bring the action civics people into the room? No, not at all. That's not our goal.
So as you pointed out early on, CLT was really designed with the intent of trying to reorient, bring back focus on liberal arts education and certainly on great texts. is this civics exam something that you foresee? I mean, how is it going to play out in practice, right? What would you ideally, in another couple of years, what would you like to see this exam become in terms of its use? Because CLT, its original form, is a college placement, college and college entrance exam. Where does this exam fit in your portfolio?
Yeah, one of the things I'm very excited about is for breaking more and more into the mainstream public school arena. And I don't think I would have said this, Rob, before Florida. And so in 2023, as part of Governor DeSantis' bid for the White House, he became a big-time CLT enthusiast, and in fact, he threatened to kick the College Board out of the state of Florida. He didn't go quite that far. In fact, this is a funny story, Rob. We were Soren and Noah and I were getting all these texts. He says, Ron DeSantis is talking about the CLT right now, and we're looking at these videos online, and he keeps calling it the classical learning test.
Oops.
And we're like, very exciting, but we're the classic learning test.
There is no classical learning test.
Yeah, they text back and they say, we've told him that. He knows that. He just wants to keep calling it the classical learning test, And I'm like, all right, I guess if you're Ron DeSantis, you can, kind of try
you get away with that,
to rename things. But look, I think what we've seen in Florida is that even in a public school arena, I mean, we were 6 months into Florida and our team is getting calls saying, the CLT really does test for grammar. We have a whole grammar section. Our school district got rid of grammar. Should we bring it back? Saying, yeah, we think you should bring grammar back. That would be a good idea. But it absolutely, I mean, if a public school district knows that they're being evaluated by the ability of their students to read and understand the great text of the Western intellectual tradition, it absolutely every time will change what's happening in the classroom as well. And I think this is something that we can get into the public school arena, even as, we're going to, and there's a lot of questions we've got to answer, to be clear. We just announced this on July 4th. But certainly a component of this is going to be a free practice test. It'll live inside the student account. Okay. And hopefully that'll just be a great teacher tool resource as well for them to get maybe as the beginning of their government class and at the end. Yeah. And that can be kind of a way to see what did you actually learn. Right. Yeah, and to focus the instruction a bit as well.
So that's interesting. The Florida example is certainly helpful because it gives us a sense that this can bring about change. Do you then foresee this test being used potentially in a civics course, in a social studies course, or something along those lines in the typical district school, and something that's adopted by the state, or really as schools choose to use them? What would ideally you like to see in the next couple of years?
Yeah, we had no dreams. I mean, in some ways, and we have always said we will never, ever, ever change any part of the test because of what a state is demanding. They often have, some boxes you've got to check. And so we've always resisted doing that. But we're in a different world. I mean, there's been a vibe shift. The vibe shift is real, right, Rob? And, in the states, they've come up with a clear vision for traditional education. So I think absolutely, we've got just this past spring, and we had legislative wins in Texas, in Arkansas, in Louisiana, huge in Oklahoma. And so I think we're speaking the same language as a lot of the leaders in these states. I think to be able to provide them a resource like this, I think is going to be very much appreciated. And so I'm viewing it, from a business perspective as well, I'm viewing this as something that can give folks a sense of what CLT is, what our vision for education is, that they might be able to easily incorporate, into their classroom as well. It can be intimidating. Classical education is often intimidating for folks in the public school arena. So I think to look at something that is classic, is reflecting America's founding, that's also basic. I mean, we don't want to have something that is like, only people right of center would want to use.
Sure. What I like about it is, again, there's a very ecumenical, very broad approach that you're taking here because civic education is on the docket. People are talking about it. And you're saying this could be useful for any student, right? As a basic measure of their capacity to enter into their majority, right? To become a citizen and to be an active citizen in the full sense. So I really like the approach. I have to ask you, how do you think this exam potentially is going to affect this conversation around civic ed? I know that's on your mind. Where would you like to see this test?
Yeah, I think there's been what I would describe as a clamoring with a bunch of institutions, and we kind of keep hearing we need this, we need this, we need this. I think it was for us, it was very similar to what happened with lower grade. For years CLT said we're not going to launch lower grade. We believe this is the lever, college entrance, that actually can really reshape and reorient academic focus. And then what happened on the lower grade side is, you had big outlets, EWTN, the Daily Wire. They exposed NWEA Maps, a big standardized testing organization, for pushing a lot of this gender ideology. They had it all right there on their website, this stuff that they were pushing. And so suddenly it was like there was almost a moral imperative to do this. And I think that there's been a kind of a clamoring as well for, if you're going to have civics education, again, you need a test. It's part of the basic infrastructure, but if it's a good test, I think you can focus it in the right way as well. And so, in terms of the details, again, adaptive, static, essay, we've got a lot of questions to answer there. And what we do want to do is listen really well, not from anyone, again, not the Action Civics crowd, but from the right stakeholders that have been thinking through this now for decades. Often.
Yeah. Well, it's a powerful vision. It's big picture. I have to just ask you, in 2 or 3 years, how would you define success? Right? I know you can't give me all the details because it's all in process right now. But what would success look like in 3 years for this American Civics Exam?
Yeah, I think every initiative at CLT is really aimed at, our mission is to reconnect knowledge and virtue, and kind of baked into that mission is the assumption, is the belief that they weren't, it wasn't broken at one time. I think this is, to me, this is the heart and soul of Lewis's abolition of man, that something broke, something came undone, that education, I think, as he refers to it, used to be oriented at getting the pupil to conform, to see the Tao, to conform to it, and to be happy in doing so. So I think the real marker of success, I think, is always, a flourishing society. I'm, certainly as a business kind of person, I want, folks to use it. We want to be in as many states as possible. I think one marker of success for me that I care a lot about is is being not just in red states, but certainly in some purple and eventually some blue states as well. Because I don't think, every parent, when they hear about classical education, right, left, center, they all want their kids to be, fed great stories. They want their sense of wonder to grow. They want them to go to school and to become more honest, not less.
That's right.
There's a universal appeal to classical education. And one of the things that has surprised me so much is that CLT can serve and has served at times as kind of a beachhead for, we saw this with Florida and other states of, oh, wow, this isn't just a random test. There's this whole movement. Oh, we need curriculum. We need textbooks. We need, and that with that, we can be a way to help further expand this movement. I think the movement as a whole actually wins when we stop saying classical education, we only ever introduced the modifier to, because it broke. I think of it like organic milk. We just called it milk. It was all organic 200 years ago. We just called it milk. And it wasn't until we started messing with it, we had to introduce a modifier to describe the original thing again.
I'm totally with you, my man. I'm totally with you. And the idea that maybe DeSantis calls it classical, maybe you call it classic, but the bottom line is we want it to be education. We want it to be the mainstream, the status quo someday soon. So that's what we're working towards. I tell you what, yours is a crazy, gutsy plan. You set out to challenge ACT and SAT, and now, of course, you're trying to help lead that charge, be the beachhead for civic ed. How do you come up with these audacious ideas, my man? How?
I told our initial investor, who was actually my college roommate, I had the idea, but it wasn't a business idea. It was just like an epiphany of you could radically reorient education if you just changed the test. Yeah. But it wasn't, it was just like a concept that I never saw, and I saw it. I was like, oh, wow. But I told my college roommate, John Wang, he wanted to know the percentage chance that CLT would work before he made an investment. And I wanted to be honest with him, and I probably exaggerated the chances. I said, 20% chance it'll work. I said, but if it does work, I think it's going to be a big deal, And by God's providence, I mean, I think the whole CLT story is very providential. There's, in a lot of ways, no good explanation that it should have worked. But I think with that, I think we've kind of grown in confidence that people want an educational revolution that is returning to the tried and true. I think the other thing that has happened is that as we have gotten to know folks at the College Board and ACT, they're no longer intimidating. I mean, they have terrible customer service. The brand is flabby and boring. Nobody's excited there. It's a bureaucracy. It is sleepy. The more we get to know the people that work there and everything else, it's like it's dying of its own accord.
Yeah.
I heard one guy put it this way, that there's no organization in America that hates itself more than the College Board.
Oh, wow.
In the sense of, look, it's designed to evaluate, to be a merit-based mechanism, and it kind of hates merit.
It's lost its merit. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're really primed for disruption, and I do feel like there's kind of a moral imperative to do what we can. I think the founders were really clear that to preserve our system of government, it would always be a fight that the next generation has to be willing to take up.
Yep.
So we're just trying to wake up and do what we can do every day.
You're doing good work, my friend. And the reality is, for our audience, and it's parents, it's teachers, it's leaders, we want to inform them about what's coming and what's coming next. And so I really wanted to make sure that we got the American Civics Exam in front of them. If you had a couple of words of advice for this audience, especially as they think about developing civic mindedness, a sense of citizenship for their own kids, their own students, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah, I think take heart. One of the Good Soil report that ACCS did, one of the really surprising finds in that study was that classically educated students, and in their case, classical Christian students, are actually far more tolerant than the students coming out of the main, secular progressive schools.
Yep.
And there's a real willingness. I mean, I think this has always been the mark of a really, in the true word of liberal mindset, a real willingness to listen well. I've been really blessed over the past several years to form a friendship with both Dr. Cornel West and Robbie George. And they're like brothers. They really do see the world very differently, but the way they describe it is that they're working to get at the truth together.
Yeah.
And so that's a different kind of posture than wanting to persuade or to convert to my position, that we're going to throw down the suspicions and say, hey, let's work at getting at the truth of things together. The other thing I'd say, Rob, is to take heart in what's already come out of this movement. It is. I'm a big believer that students who have received this kind of education are the very best argument for this kind of education.
Yep.
You've got 5 kids of your own, went to Great Hearts, and it's students, young people like your own that a lot of people haven't come in contact with many students like this, and they meet them and they're floored. And I'm not bashing public school students. I went there and I taught there, but there is something exceptional in the formation of the young people coming out of these classical schools that I think is validating this kind of education in a far more powerful way than any statistics or anything else can do.
I think you're absolutely right, and we pray that it will continue to grow and flourish with the support of organizations like your own. So we're really thankful, Jeremy, that you joined us today. Appreciate it.
Rob, we're very excited about Classical Commons and the work you're doing. I think it's one of the greatest needs in this movement is that schools are equipped with excellent faculty that believe in this vision for education, that have a huge heart for the next generation. So we're grateful for what you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. We'll talk soon.